stealthy, whimsical platformers, addictive kart racing, and mustachioed mascots, Nintendo is a business. With gaming being an ever-changing and turbulent industry, the Japanese conglomerate has to do what it can to stay at the top. And sometimes the company has committed acts that are so concerning it's hard to believe these are the same guys who brought us Animal Crossing and Pikmin. Nobody is going to deny that Nintendo have made some of the best titles ever and have continuously innovated the industry, but with that said, they aren't as innocent as perhaps they seem. I'm Sai, this is WhatCulture, and here are the 10 worst things that Nintendo have done. Number 10. Manufacturing scarcity. With remakes and remasters surging in popularity, the Nintendo fanbase had been hoping for a revised version of the classic 3D Mario games for eons. But when Super Mario 3D All-Stars was finally revealed for the Switch, it turned out to be a bare-bones release of Super Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy 1. Though it was nice to play these games on a modern system, the flaws were clear as day. Despite the fact that Mario Galaxy 2 is considered one of the best Wii games, it was noticeably absent from the collection. But that's really not the root of the problem. Despite the fact the 3D Mario trilogy was well over a decade old, Nintendo expected consumers to pay full price. And anyone who intended to wait for that price to drop was in for a rude awakening, since Super Mario 3D All-Stars was only available temporarily, meaning customers had a limited window in which to purchase it. And sure, the game was available digitally, but this option was also temporary purely to manufacture scarcity and a feeling of Nintendo-branded FOMO. Worst of all, despite the absolutely warranted online outcry, the collection sold well, and as such, Nintendo pulled the same trick with Super Mario Bros. 35, an online subscription title that was only available briefly. In the grand scheme of things, it might not be the worst decision Nintendo has made, but it reeks of unnecessary greed and not a lot else. Number 9. Never fixed the Joy-Cons. One of the finest features of the Nintendo Switch are the Joy-Cons. They're detachable, wireless, and allow for motion-based gameplay. They can attach to the system, be played as a pair, and if you really want to, each Joy-Con can work as an individual controller, providing you have small enough digits. Of course, we should have known it was too good to be true. Shortly after the Switch's release, fans came to experience stick drift, where the analog stick registers movements without being touched on various Joy-Cons. Depending on the game, this made gameplay range from annoying to impossible. If the title in question requires pinpoint precision, what do you do if your character or cursor moves around on its own? Drift could get so bad, selecting options on the home screen became a task in itself. And this isn't an uncommon problem either. Up to 60% of Switch owners stated they've experienced drift in some form. Worse still, this problem could occur in as little as 12 months since purchase. Joy-Cons break so regularly you'd think Nintendo would lower the price, but even now these flawed controllers can cost over $70, despite the fact there's a good chance they'll start to glitch within a year. With that said, Nintendo could be forgiven if they remedied the issue along the way, but after 8 years the drift hasn't gone, which has led to genuine legal disputes that the company has been knowingly selling defective products. And considering their apparent lack of attempt to correct this issue over the entire lifespan of the Switch, well, people are right to be hesitant about the Switch 2. Number 8. Pay for games you don't own over and over. The Wii and Wii U utilize an emulation service called the Virtual Console that allowed customers to download retro games. By hopping onto the Wii Shop channel or Nintendo eShop, consumers could trade points or real currency to buy Nintendo titles. It may have been pure nostalgia bait, but it was gratifying to replay classics from various consoles, and the Wii library in particular was absolutely stuffed with classic ROMs. The Virtual Console was such a hit, it was assumed Nintendo would utilize a similar system for the Switch. But that generation's Nintendo Switch Online was met with apprehension for numerous reasons. First of all, the number of games available paled in comparison to what came before. Sure, maybe Nintendo was starting small and building up, but 8 years later, the console has far less games than were available on the Wii. Secondly, it was a subscription-based model, meaning gamers could no longer buy and access classic games in perpetuity on the system and would have to continue to pay for the service. So when Mega Drive and N64 games were added in 2021 and were added to a second tier that demanded more money from consumers, well, people weren't happy. Now Nintendo is asking for more money for the model, which again felt low on value as it was, even without taking into consideration the fact subscribers didn't even own the games. After a couple of years, subscribers will have forked over hundreds of dollars to continue to play, say, classic Tetris and wait for the original Pokemon games, which, for example, have still yet to show up. The Virtual Console was so straightforward and positively received, and Nintendo replaced it with something worse in every way. Number 7. Game inaccessibility leads to piracy. Despite their child-friendly image, Nintendo are ruthless when it comes to piracy. In the last decade, the big N gained a reputation for shutting down websites and services that supplied emulators and ROMs of classic video games, only adding more to the growing concern about that statistic. 80% of video games have been lost to time due to poor preservation. Not only that, there have been occasions where they've demanded up to $150,000 for every infringement of their work. Interestingly, one of the easiest ways Nintendo can combat this issue is to make their games more accessible. It seems so simple. Even though Nintendo Switch Online allows subscribers to play a wealth of games, I just said it, most of them aren't there. Studies have shown that people are willing to pay if what they want is made available to them over choosing the route of piracy. If Nintendo were able to put the 2 and 2 together and add the likes of, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Donkey Kong 64 and so on to the NSO, then people wouldn't feel so obligated to track down ROMs to play them. That's not to say these things aren't complicated due to rights issues and that piracy would just disappear overnight if they did so, but it is strange that the company would rather spend time and effort putting court injunctions in place to punish rather than make these games available to buy. Nintendo should remember that they don't do themselves any favors when going after small-time hackers. Speaking of which, number 6, they sued a man called Bowser forever. Although Nintendo are in their legal right to protect their properties, the way they crack down on ROM websites isn't just tough, it's cruel. Probably the best example of Nintendo's uncompromisable policy towards pirates centers around a Canadian hacker called Gary Bowser, and yes, that's his real name. When Nintendo learned Bowser was pirating 3DS and Switch titles, they had the fittingly named hacker's operation shut down. Since he undermined Nintendo's intellectual property, Bowser was sentenced to 40 months in prison and a $4.5 million fine. But it didn't stop there. Nintendo tacked on a civil lawsuit, so Bowser owed them an extra $10 million. Being an unfeasible amount to pay, Nintendo compromised, in their minds anyway, by allowing them to snag at least 25% of Bowser's monthly income until the debt is paid. So quick maths here, if Bowser earned say $5,000 a month, it would take almost 1,000 years for him to be debt-free. Cool. Also, it's worth mentioning that Bowser only managed to pay Nintendo $175 within the first 3 years due to the aforementioned prison time, and his legal record won't make things easy either. Though this draconian punishment is meant to ward off would-be pirates, suing a man into oblivion until his dying day doesn't put Nintendo in the best light. Number 5, releasing unplayable Switch ports. Even though the Switch has a hefty selection, there are many coveted titles that can't run on the hybrid console due to its limitations in hardware, storage, and RAM. With that said, the Switch has successfully ported some high graphic properties like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Doom Eternal, and kinda The Witcher 3. It's okay. However, some ports range from janky to unfinished. Many Resident Evil titles can only be played through the cloud, often with spotty results. The Batman Arkham trilogy felt like false advertising since the third installment, Batman Arkham Knight, was virtually unplayable. The Switch version of Mortal Kombat 1 was so laughably broken, it's regarded as one of the worst ports in recent memory. Look, to be fair, having state-of-the-art games functioning perfectly on a less powerful system is a miracle, but sometimes there's no excuse. Although several Kingdom Hearts entries were ported to the Switch in 2022, they're only available on the cloud. The earliest available title, Kingdom Hearts 1.5 Remix, was released on the PlayStation 3 in 2013, so there's no rationale why the Square Classic couldn't be purchased digitally or physically. This decision could be acceptable if the Kingdom Hearts franchise played well on the cloud. On the contrary, it's borderline impossible due to the abominable connectivity problems. Porting these games was executed so poorly the developers shouldn't have bothered in the first place, and the consumers who bought these titles and then couldn't even play them have every right to be angry. Number 4, stabbing their former partner in the back. Sony and Nintendo have been rivals ever since the PlayStation debuted, and this is deeply ironic since Nintendo played a major hand in the console's creation. During the early 90s, Nintendo seemed unstoppable after the Super Nintendo outperformed every other system on the market. Rest in peace, Sega. Willing to push its tech further, Nintendo partnered with Sony to develop a CD add-on for the console. Nintendo grew uneasy about the terms of the contract, especially surrounding Sony's control over licensing and profits from CD-based games. Unable to see eye to eye, Nintendo thought it best for the two to part ways. It's a shame things didn't work, but there shouldn't have been any ill will between the pair since it's just business. However, Nintendo's next move was pretty low. Oblivious that they had rubbed Nintendo the wrong way, Sony confidently declared they were teaming up with them at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show. The very next day, Nintendo announced at the same venue that they had replaced Sony with Philips. Of course, Sony had the last laugh. Rather than letting the project go, they continued with their PlayStation system, which went on to sell 100 million units. If Nintendo didn't humiliate Sony in such a petty way, maybe they wouldn't have been encouraged to one-up their former business partner. Also, that partnership with Philips eventually resulted in the Philips CDI Zelda game, so Nintendo looked double stupid in the end. Number 3, mistreating Rare time and time again. Rareware, which was co-founded by Chris and Tim Stamper, is responsible for creating some of the greatest games ever, including the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, GoldenEye 007, Banjo-Kazooie, and Perfect Dark. Serving as a second-party developer for Nintendo, you'd think the company would greatly appreciate them. However, there are many examples of Nintendo taking the British developers for granted. Despite the fact that GoldenEye 007 became revolutionary, it nearly didn't see the light of day since Nintendo stopped funding for 3 months and tried to can it. When Rare started working on a new IP called Dinosaur Planet, Nintendo repurposed it into a Star Fox spin-off so that it would be more marketable. Making this decision in the 11th hour resulted in the game feeling like 2 different titles had been squished into one, which was jarring to say the least. Nintendo may have mismanaged Rare a little, but there was no doubt they were a winning formula when they worked together. Even despite all the above, they routinely turned out some of the best and most beloved titles on Nintendo systems. As a result, the Stamper brothers were certain that Nintendo would actually purchase Rare. But when the contract expired, Nintendo cut all ties, allowing Microsoft to swoop in and buy them instead. Microsoft didn't exactly treat the company right either, causing a slow exodus of all their most talented creators and turning Rare into just another studio working on Connect games. Sure, maybe we got there in the end with Sea of Thieves, but if Nintendo bought Rare when they had the chance, then we could be playing Banjo-Kazooie 7 right now. Number 2, going after content creators' revenue. Being the devil's advocate, Nintendo's brand control is purely to preserve their characters, games, and assets, which are viewed as highly valuable commodities. Having said that, Nintendo can be just as tough when it comes to innocent content creators. Since 2013, there have been cases of Let's Play videos surrounding Nintendo being deleted and accounts being suspended unless the creators have permission from the company. Perhaps the height of the controversy with Nintendo's DMCA policies was their demand to earn revenue from creators that simply use footage from their games. In what they thought was an olive branch, they seemed to say, hey, yeah, you can do Let's Plays of our games, but we'll take every penny from those. Thanks. As if people were just going to nod and say, thank you, Nintendo, the heel of your boot tastes especially good today. The heavy-handedness of the whole thing saw many channels affected. In particularly egregious cases, tiny creators with a few dozen subscribers were just as likely to incur their wrath as those who frequently appear on the YouTube front page. The money Nintendo scraped from these videos could basically be chump change to the company, but it was a living wage for content creators and in some cases led to suspensions or channel removal. Whilst Nintendo have continued to hand out DMCAs to content creators in the decade since, they have at least gotten a little bit better at aiming and not necessarily firing wildly. Taking down reposts of their content is one thing, but the blanket smash and grabs have only contributed to their reputation online as being needlessly cruel and antagonistic. And number 1, jacking up the price of Switch 2 games and then hiding it. Although the Switch 2 was hyped to an immeasurable level, the Nintendo Direct for the upcoming console seemed to exceed all expectations, at least at first. With a ton of exclusive games in the pipeline, 4K output, strong third-party support, and improved hardware, the gaming community looked like they were in for a treat. Those, myself included, who watched the Direct got so excited one crucial detail might have eluded them: the pricing. Since it wasn't mentioned, players naturally assumed the games would cost the same as usual. That's why it was shocking when it came to light online after the Direct that Nintendo Switch titles will cost up to $79.99. And we're not talking about Nintendo's heavy hitters like Metroid Metroid or Donkey Kong, Switch re-releases like Super Mario Party Jamboree are also getting the more than full price treatment. If that isn't a slap in the face, ports cost around the same. The Switch 2 port of Breath of the Wild, lest we forget a game that came out on the Wii U, is over $67.99 US, despite being nearly a decade old. Nintendo have emphasized the price hike is justified due to the amount of content that each title offers. But considering the billion-dollar corporation is drowning in money, it's not like they need to scramble for pennies. The worst part is the obfuscation of it, generating all the hype from the Direct, and then a swing of the hammer that came from looking online after the fact. Even though the Switch 2 is being pre-ordered like crazy, Nintendo's greed could massively backfire. In recent weeks, many of Nintendo's video announcements and live streams have been flooded with messages regarding drop the price. And whilst the pre-orders have been crazy, it remains to be seen if this kind of works in the long term. After all, the video game industry is a marathon, not a sprint. The controversy surrounding the topic is so profound, Nintendo may cave under the pressure and reduce the prices, but considering how long it takes for them to learn from any of their mistakes, well, don't hold your breath. Woo! Complaining about Nintendo so much really took it out of me, and I don't like to do that. I like to talk about the good stuff they've made, and hey, here's a video of me doing just that, talking about the best game that Nintendo released every single year up to 2024. Thanks for watching, I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.